All right, welcome everyone to Office Hours with myself, Brendan Boyle, in sunny Palo Alto, and Dr. Stuart Brown in sunny Carmel. And thank you so much for joining. We're going to have an Office Hours conversation about the play, our favorite subject. And I'm a practitioner. I've been a toy inventor my whole life. And Stuart and I created a class that's very popular at Stanford called Design for Play, along with Elisa Fennenbach and a few helpful others, John Cassidy. So we're going to talk about that class, and we're going to talk about some questions on play, and it'll go back and forth. You're welcome to shoot a question. We have someone monitoring the chat. Shoot a question. Just give us your first name and where you're located so we can sort of share where all our office hours are coming from. And then we'll get to that. We'll answer someone's curating those. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can, but we'll answer those after we do a little chat back and forth. So Stuart, welcome. It's so fun to hang out with you again.
Hey, great to be with you, Brendan, and with this august group of players.
I know I got introduced to you by one of my favorite people, a very playful person, David Kelly. And that was probably 20 plus years ago. So it's amazing. Let's talk big picture first. What is play? Just give us an overview of play. And you're a researcher, scientist, but the thing I love about you is you're able to tell us lay people what that science means.
Well, what is play? Well, if you really have to ask yourself that question, you may not be playing enough, because play is an experience and it takes you into a separate state of being, but it's done for its own sake. You don't have to have an outcome. It's fun. It appears purposeless a lot of the time. It has a sense of time lapse. Time doesn't seem to pass in the same way when you're playing. But I think when we see it in a puppy or another person or experience it ourselves, we kind of know that's play. And so it's hard to define. It is a little like love to some degree. And from my standpoint, I love to think about it as being a really fundamental part of nature herself.
Yeah. The way I really leaned into the analogy of sleep. People know how important sleep is, but we didn't really know how important sleep was till about 50, 60 years ago when we started to do the science of sleep. And now we know there are all types of sleep, and we just believe the science is there. Unless you're a researcher, you probably don't understand it, but you know it's important. So the science of play, which is what you and I both sit on, you created the National Institute for Play, and we're
Right.
trying to fund the science of play. And there are a lot of great studies out in the last 4 or 5 years that show how important it is. So for me, I lean into people used to think sleep was just for kids. And if you're a tough adult, you could stay up all night. But that's not true. And play's not just for kids, it's for all ages. So I just want to reintroduce for those who just have joined. I'm Brendan Boyle. I'm a toy inventor and founder of the Ideal Play Lab. I'm in sunny Palo Alto, just blocks from Stanford. And Stuart's in sunny Carmel. And he studied play his whole life as a researcher. So welcome and thanks again. If you send a question to us, send it in the chat. We're monitoring those. Just give us your first name and where you're located. It would be great. Well, how does play contribute to building strong relationships and improving our communication?
Well, if you look at the natural history of play, that's kind of unfettered. Let's say you've got 3 or 4 little kids in a family, and they've got neighbors who also have kids and others close to the age. And pretty soon you find in nature, they would mix it up. And in that process of mixing it up, they have a sense of belonging to not only themselves first, but to the small group in which they're working and playing together. And the sense of community, trust, empathy, optimism, resilience when you've had a tough day. These things begin to be formulated in early play when it occurs.
Yeah, I'm 6 out of 7 kids and grew up in Michigan. We were free range kids. We just sort of ran around. And this concept of handicapping, you explained it to me later, how puppies will handicap big dogs around little dogs. I didn't, it took me years to realize Oh, I was always beating my older brothers at a race. They were letting me just so it was more fun for them, more playful. So,
That's absolutely right. That handicap. I had an older brother, same experience.
well, I had another older brother, maybe not, but so tell us a little bit about play personalities. I know you've done a lot of work on that, and you even have some patents on some work around discovering your play personality. What's that mean?
Well, in the course of my long exploration of play, I interviewed first as a psychiatrist and then as a play investigator, investigated the play reviews, the play histories, the play lives of many, many people. And since I taught both at Stanford and elsewhere, I also had some of the students that I was teaching review a fair number of people, so that probably in the course of 30 or 40 years, around 6,000 play histories were reviewed
Wow.
by me and others. And you begin to get a sense when you review that many that there's a clustering. Are you an explorer? Are you a director? Are you a collector? Are you an artist? Are you a mover? Are you a competitor, etc.? These begin to be clusterings of play itself that are natural and an expression often of the intrinsic nature, the talent, the personality of the person, and is it's like a fingerprint. It's a
Yeah, it's
very
just like
distinct
if
form of being.
if you're really into skiing, you know there's tons of different types of snow. So there are tons of different types of play and different types of play personalities. Um, we enjoy teaching our class, and we can sort of change people's mindset because a lot of adults think play is frivolous or just for kids. When I work with companies, I'm working with companies now, giving workshops on how to get people excited to come back into the office. How do you make the engagement in the office more interesting? And it's not ping pong tables or foosballs. Those are fine. Don't get me wrong, but those are break time. How do you make the work more interesting? How do you make the workplace feel more different and exciting? Like people want to come to a party, so make your office and the work feel engaging. And companies have something called a KPI, key performance indicator, for our business friends out there. And there's one on engagement. So I usually use the word engagement. Well, how's your KPI? you know, and
Good for you.
yeah. So let's talk about a little bit more about play. How do you describe play to someone who feels like a grouch or someone who I don't need that, I just want to work all day? How do you break through?
Well, let me give you an example. I once saw a woman while I was in practice who came to me for depression and said right at the outset, I don't know how to play. I was a foster child, blah, blah. She'd had a tough, very difficult upbringing. Well, in the course of reviewing her life, uh, she brightened up when we talked about jazz. And so I said, well, how much listening do you do to jazz? Oh, not enough. So we got her listening to more jazz, and then I got her a baton, and she began to direct listening to Coltrane and others with her baton while she had her stereo on. Pretty soon, she developed a desire to extend that play nature into actually becoming dancing and doing social dancing. So she found her play nature, which was primarily associated with music and rhythm, and acted on it.
That's
Just
that's
one example. And
that's
I think,
wonderful. We started doing 3 or 4 years back in the class. The first project is called the Personal Play Project. And I invite anyone in the audience to do this. We assign these are type A Stanford students, right? They're all go, go, go. We tell them to find a new hobby they've never done, interview experts in that hobby, and then practice it for 3 weeks, after class, and then come back and report. And I can't tell you what permission it gives these students. We've
and
got people
how.
doing poetry and art and singing lessons and doing all this kind of stuff because now it's an assignment. But when I talk to people about hobbies, then they really light up about they kind of go into that state of flow. And at the end of 10 weeks, we ask people who are they still doing their hobbies, and about 90% are. We had one Stanford business student, fantastic student, Roy. He took up stained glass art. And it turned out he was an opera singer in a former career, and he presented his hobby singing an opera. It was the whole class was great. Play can be in any part of the process. So, also, again, welcome for those who just joined. I'm Brendan Boyle. I'm a toy inventor and founder of the Ideal Play Lab and running workshops and other cool stuff around play. Dr. Brown has studied play his whole life, founded the National Institute for Play. If you really want to geek out on play, go there. You can find all the play personalities there. There's a wonderful library there of all works. And it's a nonprofit, so it is Giving Tuesday. So we'll ask you guys at the end. We'll show you a link if you feel like you want to fund a little bit more play. What was your favorite toy growing up, Stuart? I love this question for people.
Well, I keep thinking of Christmas Day when I was about 10 and I got a Schwinn bike. And I remember with that a kind of permission to explore the local neighborhoods and maybe even go all the way from South Chicago to Mount Greenwood, but on the bike. So my favorite toy when you asked the question, which was unexpected, was that Schwinn
Wow.
24-inch small bike.
Better go on eBay and buy it. Mine was Hot Wheels, and it's a wonderful sort of circle because I get to work with the Hot Wheels team. And when you're down at Mattel, you can tell all the Hot Wheels designers buy all the really fancy hot cars in the parking lot. But I do ask people this question, and for those in the audience, raise your hand if you remember your favorite toy. And I suspect a lot of you do. And there's a colleague of mine, or ours at the D School, Moshan, and she's creating a course on endearing design. So I think of endearing design. I suspect a lot of you still have your toys. So think about what that means to you. I love toys because I invent them, but toys is a noun. Play is a verb. I'm much more excited about verbs. And fun is a feeling. So if you're a designer, you can get to an emotion, but I like my iPhone, but I don't have my favorite iPhone from 7 years ago, right? Like it's a thing of the past. It's a toys endearing design. So let's see. What do you think about technology in impact in our ability to play? And I have an opinion on that if you want me to start.
Yeah, go ahead.
People are asking me, what about AI? Is this going to ruin everything? And I say, I don't know. I can't predict the future, but I do know it's a technology and you should use some exploratory play and see what works for you before you start to like say this is going to save the world or kill it. Play around with it. And this is, as leading big invention teams and things like that, I tell leaders all the time, tell your folks, just go play around with that for a little bit. And that frees them up to learn something. If they got pressure, like there's a meeting tomorrow, you don't tell them to play around with stuff. But so that's sort of my take on it.
Good.
And
I don't have a lot to add. I tend to like to be outdoors and being involved in nature more than direct involvement with technology. But I have to say, I spend a lot more of my time watching the computer screen or my iPhone than in sniffing the beautiful essence of nature.
yeah, well, there's kinetic movement, dancers, that's, all that kind of mind-body connection. Most people think the mind just got everything. If you cut off your head and could save your mind, and I tell people, untie your shoe and see if your brain can tie your shoe. You might look at your shoes and look sad, and someone might come by and tie your shoe. So maybe, you're using your brain to look sad, but the mind body. So we use at the D School, think with your hands, because once you start making something, whether physical or digital, and that's constructive play. So once you're making something, then it's going to come to life and you're going to figure out some new things. So thinking with your hands. We also say in our class, this will resonate with you, Stuart, we want high fidelity thinking, low fidelity prototyping. There are design courses that you can keep taking to get really good at making stuff, but it's the thinking that's important. So,
hey, Brendan, you remind me of Frank Wilson, the neurologist, who taught me that hand-brain coevolution is a fundamental part of being human, and that there is at NASA the hiring capability is not who got the best grades at MIT or Caltech getting their PhD, but were they tinkerers as kids and did they keep building things? Because building things along with education is part of the ability to think three-dimensionally and be a good researcher. So
We have
what
an
you just
exercise.
said about toys and hands and building things, construction play, really basic.
Yeah, I do a lot of building, a lot of tinkering. One of my favorite inventors I get to work with recently is Josh Finkel. He's an amazing inventor and thinks with his hands. There are other things with their hands, folks, in more of a, that's as a maker. Michelle Lee is much more strategy and thinking with her hands in that way. But we have this exercise called design and make a hat. So we asked the class, raise your hand if you're a hat designer. No one's a hat designer. Maybe one time ago, you got a big advantage. So we put them in teams of three. And they each have to make a hat. They get all worried. And each hat has to somehow relate to the other hats. And then we pull out aluminum foil and tape in construction paper, and they go wild. We get the best hats in 15 minutes because they're playing, they're thinking with their hands. And if they just had to draw a hat, they wouldn't come up with anywhere it's rich. So it's getting people to play and think with their hands. So take that exercise. I think I've written up on my LinkedIn. You'll find it there or somewhere else.
But having observed that for a few years in your class, Brendan, what also happens is there's a bonding process between the hat makers that wasn't there before. They become really a sense of friends and having a mutual identity. It's great to watch.
Yeah, we try to mix up our class as much as possible. Most classrooms are like an airplane ride. You sit down, you're either lucky or not, or you got no one next to you. Versus I had so much bad education growing up. Sorry, Catholic school in Michigan, but it was like you got set with your alphabetical friends, and that's who you knew. So we are constantly trying to mix up the class so they're meeting new people. And the point of the D schools, we've got 35 students. They're all from different schools. So there'll be 5 business schools, 5 educations. So for the teachers out there, I'm passionate about this subject about how do you improve the learning? And one is you got to be more engaging. You got to really feel like you're loving what you're talking about, and the students will realize that. We did a project with Scholastic, or maybe it was Playworks, but we're trying to get more play in the classroom, which was fascinating. So the insights from the students came back was this, Stuart. It was like they like recess, not because of what you think as much, it's because they get to move around. Because when you're just sitting in the classroom, it's frustrating. Tell a 6-year-old to sit still, right? So the students came back with all these wonderful solutions about having the students move around the classroom. And that's what we do a lot. We just have the students move around. So I think they like that. Let's see. We talked about play personalities. And what play personality are you, Stuart?
Well, it depends on the age you ask me. I think prior to being an old character, I was a mover or a kinesthete more than anything else. But now I'm to the probably the despair of my grandchildren, I'm a storyteller. Yeah. So because that fits my graying and aging self. But I think it's been more than one particular play personality. I think the original joy I had was in music, but I wasn't particularly talented. So that became something else.
How'd you get interested in music? Was that a parent or?
My parent gave me a clarinet and I played it and enjoyed being taught by a really good clarinetist, but I didn't practice much. So, it was not as deep a joy as jumping off garage roofs and playing chase and escape games.
Yeah, my son's a composer. He's in his PhD at University of Illinois, and it's wonderful to see him create. I create stuff, but he creates music, and he enjoys it like you wouldn't believe. He's in that state of flow, and we've got to collaborate on a few things. I'm getting some questions already. So one is a difference between what is gamification, and that word always sort of makes me cringe. I don't think they say it in the way I mean it, but it always feels like candy versus. I like the word game mechanics. Understanding how game mechanics can help whatever you're doing. So versus gamification, I'm never interested in buying 10 sandwiches to get the 11th one free. It doesn't mean that's gamification. Game mechanics are like a video game. It's really easy at first. You lose, you get back up, you do it again. You keep doing it, you learn. And that's a good way to think about learning is quick failures. Um, Tell us about competition in play, Stuart. I've heard you talk about this before.
Well, I learned a lot about this from Jane Goodall's study of chimpanzees and the personal relationship she and I have enjoyed for 30 plus years. But what she talked about was when chimps are very, very young, they're non-competitive. They play, tussle with each other, but there's not a winner or a loser. But when the chimpanzees become adolescent and get into beginning to think about are they going to be reproductive, then they are competitive, and that competition can also be very joyful for the chimpanzees and non-destructive. And I think the presence of competition among human beings, hierarchical human beings, is within the range of norm. And the important thing in competition is probably for the adults in the room to limit the aggression and allow the joyful winning and losing, which is a great message for all of us to both win and lose. If you win, don't become full of yourself. If you lose, you can try again.
Yeah,
So,
that made me think of mean-spirited competition, which we see in a lot of professional sports, and good-spirited competition,
and how?
which you see on the field with just kids playing. We got a question from, can you speak how the arts incorporated into your work and research? My undergrad was in mechanical engineering. When I came to Stanford, I was in the Masters of Design program. It was a mixture of engineering, artists, and business. So it's the first time I ever got to see how an artist thought, and it was so different. And they
Mm.
inspired me around curiosity because engineering was brute solving. So curiosity and creativity, I think, overlap. So I think the arts are a wonderful way to keep yourself curious. And I see the world differently because of a professor in art that I had. And that spark any thoughts with you, Stuart?
Well, I think the artist often is more attuned to their own imagination, regardless of whether they're painters or sculptors or what have you. And the ability to take things such as beauty and awe and competition, for example, and other elements, and formulate them into some kind of expression that that emphasizes your own individual take on that is the inner artist that's there in all of us. And
Yeah.
I think that play and art, uh, I think, very often go together and reinforce each other.
Yeah, I love that. Let's see, from Florida, South Florida, fun in motion toy. Hey, all right, sounds cool. Have you looked into the world of circus arts and play expressive performances, art, clowning, acrobatics, juggling? Love that. I wish every grade school had improv and theater as part of the curriculum.
Yes.
So I've hired magicians, and because they think differently, and you think of magic and design, you think about an airplane's kind of magical. It's floating. So yes, and then we started doing this years ago, Stuart. Instead of just a boring presentation with four students up there presenting their slides that they haven't practiced, we make them do a skit. They have to write it out. They can have the cue cards up there, and then the most boring skit is better than the best slideshow. And then Stuart and I did something clever. We told students if you do a skit in a different class, we'll give you extra credit. And if the professor doesn't like it, we'll go talk to them and indemnify you. We've never had to do that. I don't know if we could, but students come back and say, we did a skit in a different class and it was fabulous, right? So they're starting to see where play can be part of everything. And for me, play is around making your team feel safe so they can take bigger risk and come up with better ideas and more fun. It means a lot of failures, but that's okay. Let's see if we got another question here. Same Florida person again. I heard you say flow. What do you find the correlation between playfulness and the flow state? Playfulness and the flow state.
I think there's overlap. Chick sent me high, the professor who monitored his students and had them describe flow states, was from my standpoint, when I read his work, the constant presence of flow was associated with a state of play also. So I think there's a great deal of overlap, and I don't see that there's tremendous difference, except that you have a frame of reference from a world famous psychologist who says it's good for you and do it.
Yeah, back to that previous question. We have, I hope he's in the audience, but Dr. Bowen White, who practiced with Patch Adams, and he certainly brought in a playfulness and circus and clowning to healing. Bowen spoke in our class several times. It's just wonderful to see that connection. So that's really cool.
Well, he's a living example of play that extends into their lifetime, and it particularly is a means of assuaging suffering that he and Patch have put into action all over the world.
What do you think's the main difference, or maybe there's not, between adults and children play?
Well, I think the format is often, most of us senior adults are not really good at getting down on the ground and rolling around rough and tumbling, but every kid likes to rough and tumble playing chase and escape games. So the format is different and the drive state is different. You get culture and you get gender and you get all kinds of suppressive cultural impulse. Okay, what are you doing that's really productive? What is the outcome of this? And instead of just having fun, very often adults suppress their play drive. And it's really, really a sad situation because we're designed as part of our human nature from birth to death to play.
Yeah, it's lovely to see like a 5-year-old dancing because they're just uninhibited, and that gives their parents an okay to dance with them. That's sort of nice. Okay, from California, I'm an early childhood education student. Nice, interested in the power of impact of play across human development. So tell us a little bit about that from the science.
Well, maybe you don't know. Brendan, that I got started in getting interested in play by studying a group of people who had the absence of play and were homicidal individuals in the Huntsville State Prison in Texas. And that was prompted by a mass murderer who was also play deprived, so that those studies, which were research-based and compared to people matched as controls, the murderers had much, much less play than the controls. So that's what got me interested originally in the research aspect of play. But what is surprising is that then if you take people who are not murderers, but who go into life with play deficiency, you begin to see consequences. I think there are toxic effects of severe play deprivation that echo themselves across individual lives and across culture, and we don't see play as a necessity for well-being, and yet it is a part of who we are as humans. So
Yeah, I would just
I don't
add to
know if
that.
that answered your question.
No, I think it does. I'll just add to that social play is so crucial for being a positive member of our society. And coming out of COVID, we got a lot of kids who are play deprived. They're
And
just, you can't
how?
play. So here's a question. How do you differentiate between hobbies and play from the flow state? I think hobbies and play, if you're lucky, like myself, your hobby can turn into your career. Like I consider inventing toys just what I love to do. And teaching, I consider a hobby. So both I can get in the state of flow. If that's not it, then just keep experimenting with new hobbies and keep going. So okay, no location other than Dr. Brown's book on play, or a couple books on play. So look those up. You'll find them in the National Institute for Play website. And you'll find more books and resources in the library in case you're joining late. The National Institute for Play is a nonprofit that Stuart founded. And today's Giving Tuesday, and we're always looking for funds to help fund the research. So look there, and then I'll post on my LinkedIn. I have a wonderful library of my own personal collection of playbooks and toy books. If you're interested in toy history or toys, you can geek out and I can give you more of those. So any other books come to mind for you right away?
Well, Peter Gray's book, Free to Play, I
Yeah.
think is a foundational book that gives such a compelling reason to include play from early life through the rest of your life, but in particular that it is a way to spot talent in young kids,
Yeah.
and I think every parent, teacher, HR person should understand the play nature of the people with whom they're dealing.
We have fellow professors in business school that teach a class on humor, and I think humor and play are like good cousins. And it's all about the power of humor, the secret business weapon. And it's I think that's what it's called, power of humor. And that's the names will come to me in a minute, but it's Naomi and well, shoot. Well, anyway, I'll put a picture of that up on my LinkedIn too. Okay, so we got a few other questions. A friend of Fred Donaldson, can you speak to wild play in the book, The Anxious Generation? The author speaks very eloquently for the need to play more, particularly risky and wild play.
Well, I think risk is an inherent part of play, but it is gradually learned so that it's not dangerous. For example, a little kid can start up a slide and get scared from the height and go back down and slowly get acclimatized to the slide and then eventually have the glee of sliding down the slide. But there is a learned process of taking risks. So there's
Yeah,
always a risk, some risk involved.
it's
And I think risky play is perhaps a misnomer, but I think parents need to understand that it may be better to have a broken arm than a damaged soul from no play.
love it. Again, for those just joining, I'm 6 out of 7, and we were free range kids, so we'd find some firecrackers in the summer. And the first one we'd light, then run for cover, right? And by the end of the hour, we're lighting them in our hands and throwing them, right? So that's risky play. And there are a bunch of us toy inventors sitting around in the play lab. We were talking about how much experience we had as fire as little kids. And there was a new mom with a son that was 2, and she goes, "My boy's not going to do that." It's just like it was risky play.
Yeah.
Yeah. You ever break a bone?
Yes.
Like doing some risky play or skiing?
No, I actually fell and broke a collarbone when I was about 4.
Ah, ouch. All right. Well, you came
How
over to
about
that.
you?
No, I never did. I broke a broken heart. What are misconceptions about play that you encounter? Or maybe we covered that if that's not interesting. Well, maybe I'll see if we've
Well,
got.
the idea that it's frivolous, that it's not important, that it's a hedonic escapism, rather than something that's a positive force for well-being, resilience,
Yeah.
bonding, and other antidepressant components that are an inherent part of being a playful person.
Yeah. We'll give a shout out to a drama therapist in Scotland. He says he's enjoying the discussion. Thanks, Sat. Hopefully we'll get to meet someday. What about different cultural types of play? Have you seen difference?
Oh gosh, yes. If you go to the some of the Middle Eastern countries where preschool children are forced to memorize the Quran, you may get a sense that there is some suppression of play that's culturally sanctioned. And there are probably too few cultures that prioritize play as being something that is as significant as exercise or nutrition.
Yeah, I think that's right. I was visiting my friend in Nigeria who's got a new book coming out all about manufacturing in Africa. Well, I was on a beach by myself running, doing some wind sprints. Well, I called them sprints, Stuart. I was kind of, and I mapped off 100 yards. And these two little girls came up. The beach was empty, and they didn't speak English. They spoke the local dialect, but they went like this, like they wanted to race. And one was 10, and one was probably 6 or 7. So I count down 3, 2, 1, and we start running. And I can tell I'm trying for the silver now after 10 yards because the 10-year-old's way out in front of me. So I'm neck and neck with the 7-year-olds to about the 90-yard line. And then she pulls out, and they were both laughing. We were all laughing. We didn't speak the language, but we were having fun just playing. And they took my water bottle as their trophy. So,
Universal language.
yeah, you can go to any country and play soccer. Don't speak the language, but you're going to have a fun game. So, all right, no location. I use play as a tool when facilitating meetings of members of family business, crafting family constitutions, family agreements. I think that's wonderful. I'll just add to that. Make the play so it's on content. So we do a door ritual each day of class. And the door ritual, one day it's like you got beads, so you come in like a superstar. One day it's jumping on a hopscotch, but it ties into the lesson of the day. If it's going to be around ideation, it's going to be some exploratory door ritual. So the rituals are a great way to break the ice, but make them on point.
Yeah.
One that I learned recently was if you got a group of people, ask everyone to tell the origin of their name. Boy, you get some great stories. It is amazing. So, all right, let's see. We got our friend in the back room, Tony, giving us some questions. I'm gonna send this one and then get this one. Okay. All right, he sent this question: problem solving, decision making.
And how? If you got a playful imagination, the options about solving a problem become more and more familiar. If you're not playful, you get upset at yourself for not solving the problem rather than throwing out a whole bunch of imaginative, crazy ideas, one of which may solve the problem.
Yeah.
So,
staying. I walk into a new environment, company or organization. I can kind of tell within a minute if it's playful or not. Even toy companies sometimes, the lobby looks more like a TSA checkpoint with a security guy there, and he looks angry at you. Versus your lobby should be on your brand, speak to what your brand is about. So, thinking of that, and then decision making. Yeah, if I can get to the CEO and tell if this person lets people take risk or people are afraid of him. If someone's afraid of you, they're not going to give you any good stuff. They're going to play it safe. Talk about play posture. And what's the leader's play posture? What should it look like? What's it look like most of the time? Here's what it looks like most of the time. They're on their device. And I told my team once, if you see me doing that, you put my phone down for me. And so yeah, talk about puppy posture and play posture.
Well, if those of you who have seen the National Geographic a long time ago of the polar bear and the sled dog, the tethered sled dog playing, their postures shift from mutual fighting and carnivorous to totally playful. And you see the hair of the bear and the fangs of the dog diminish. And pretty soon they're rolling around with each other, looking at each other in the eye, having a sense of mutual trust that is a part of their play posture.
Yeah.
Well, we mimic some of that ourselves.
For the CEOs in the room, everyone at a team meeting is looking at you. So you got to be aware of your play posture. It should be looking like engaged versus thinking about something else. Francine from Portland, Oregon. Hi, Francine. What can I do to convince the decision makers at the local state level to convince them that play is learning for them to move away from the academic emphasis, especially in the early childhood years? Well, that was an interesting question, but it said local and state level. That sort of had me already thinking that's going to be tough.
Why move away from the academic? Because the American Academy of Pediatrics, for example, in 2018 put out a really good paper that said as a headline, play equals learning. And so if you want academic excellence, you have to infuse play into the academic environment, whether it's preschool or graduate school.
No, yeah, definitely. And again, that just overlaps what we keep saying. The science of play is so important. Let's see. I want to go back. I found the name of that book that Demi wrote. It's In Her Hands. So she should get that. And she's got a really playful attitude, trying to export things from Africa versus, export versus just export materials and things like that. All right, Stuart, what other thoughts? What else haven't we chat about in your office hours?
Oh my gosh, we haven't talked about the hard wiring of the subcortex of the brain
Oh.
for play. And that's the kind of stuff that I get grooved on. That'll probably put most of the audience to sleep. But
How would you put that in layman's terms? It's intrinsic, it's built into us like we need sleep.
well, if you look at the bumblebees, octopuses, uh, animals that are very, very primitive, primal platypuses, you begin to see that there is a wiring for play that we all share. And there's some articles that have been written in very, very scientific journals, one of which is in the Neuron Journal 2023, which talks about a portion of the brain that we share with all social mammals, that when you add a suppressor to it, it stops play. When you add a facilitator to it, this particular area of the brain, it increases play, so that if you take the cerebral cortex of playful animals off of their brain, which some researchers have done, they still play. So the fundamental part of
Love it.
our
Love it.
being
Love it.
is playful.
The other book I reference is Humor Seriously by Jennifer Auker and Naomi. Awesome book. I can't recommend that one enough. For you CEOs in the audience, I hope you're going to be more playful. Hello from South Carolina. I work with the youth education program. We're exploring how we can encourage pet parents to add more play in their lives by including their pets.
By doing what?
By including their pets.
Hey, my assistant Darlene brought her puppy into the office here last week, and the puppy is called Rudy. And I'm telling you, the day changed, because all Rudy did was play with each of us, and then play with the two dogs that I have in my household. And it was so contagious that it got into the sort of the bone marrow of all of us, whether we were dogs or humans.
I
So
think it's
bringing
just
pets into, playful pets in particular, into a family or into a setting is a really good move.
I just think it's a good reminder. Bailey lives next door. It's an 8-year-old golden retriever. Still acts like a puppy most of the day, right? Like they just
Yeah,
and so to remind yourself to age like that, right? Like who's
yeah.
like hanging out with you?
Well, you know that, Brendan, you've heard some of my long speeches, that there is this concept called neoteny, which is the eternal childhood of primate humans and the eternal childhood of golden retrievers. They play for their whole life. They die of old age while still being playful puppies. Well, we're designed to have play throughout our life, and we suffer when we don't.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better. All right, here's something they don't say where they're from, but with all the data and research out there about the benefits of play and fun, why do you suppose so many organizations still seem to deny it? When they have so many burned out employees. I think they get it confused. They get it confused with taking a break or let's take tomorrow off or do something like that versus let's figure out a better problem to work on. What's more interesting? That's why I always like people say, what's the favorite toy you invented? I've had a couple hundred things hit the market. I'm most interested in the one I'm working on now because it seems, like it could, it seems exciting. It's new kind of stuff. So how do you keep the work interesting? I would say. Um, all right,
Well
from
said.
Vashon Island, go ahead, Stuart. Oh, well said. Thank you. From Vashon Island, Washington, in what ways can play be used as a tool for social change and conflict resolution among youth in educational settings?
Boy, that's a good question. And I think this is where preschool play is really significant. The kids who don't engage in play during preschool have a lot more trouble bonding, forming cooperative agreements with other kids, trusting authority figures, so that getting play established as a part of life early seems really important and a social necessity.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Our good friend Jill Levinson started the nonprofit Playworks that brings more organized
Yes,
play into the playgrounds, especially in the inner cities where it's just, it's a bunch of bullies running around. So bringing that and giving the tools for the instructors or the teachers and going in with volunteers, it's really done a wonderful way to like get kids to play together.
I'd like to add a little bit about Jill's work because it not only affects the lives of the kids and their future life, it changes the attitude of the school toward learning and toward the kids. It alters the level of violence at recess, and it changes the family life of the kids who are become consummate players. So Jill's capacity through bringing play into very, very high risk inner city schools is, to me, a monumental accomplishment.
It reminded me I got a report card in the sixth grade, and all it said was, Brendan only wants to go out and play basketball. I think I got a C minus. And then it said, at least he's an asset to the class. And I didn't know what the word asset meant. I thought that the teacher was calling me an ass. So,
uh,
all right, we got a few more minutes. We do want to direct you at the end. We'll put up a slide that says where you can go to the National Institute for Play website and perhaps make a donation. Hello from Mexico. Do you think adults can get back to being playful? If I wanted to create a place that promotes going back to play in adults, what would be helpful? It's not Vegas. I hear more laughter. This is from John Cassidy, our friend. I hear more laughter in a, sixth grade playground than you do at Vegas, right? Like, so it's just, I don't know. It's encouraging. I like cities like in Europe where you're walking around all day and their restaurants and everything. It's not car culture, and it's just it encourages curiosity.
yeah. I think the sense if everybody looked at themselves in the mirror when they're brushing their teeth and said, what am I going to do today that's playful for me and for those around me? And how can I induce more play in the people I know? Our culture would change and we would have a more joyful overall culture. It's possible because the instinct to play is already there. It just has to be uh, hypertrophied.
Yeah, I do a little experiment every time I'm at Whole Foods. I try to give the eye contact to the person checking out. Okay, I notice everyone in line is just pays and moves on like this person doesn't exist. I also have never signed my own name on the credit card thing. I always sign I'm King of England or I'm help. This is not me. No one ever cares.
Yeah, good for
Well, I'm
you.
playing a little bit, there.
Way
All
to
right, we're
go.
gonna take, I think, maybe one more if Tony's got one for me. Otherwise, I think we'd rather have you feeling like the lecture didn't go too long. Our office hours are this. Oh, for the younger students out there, I just had office hours earlier today. Take a job where you get to go into work. All the important meetings happen in between the Zoom meetings. That's where you're going to build your relationships. That's where you're going to meet people. And that's much better than that. So if a company isn't it going in at least 3 days a week, then don't do it. It's just no fun. So I would say that. Last one. Can you speak to any research on the value of improvisational performance in helping adults grow? I
I
can.
don't have any quantitative uh, capacity, but I know having met a couple of improvisational comics who are gifted, the outcome of improvisational uh, activity in a group is that the group itself becomes more joyful and more productive. So, that's about as close as I can get to answering that one.
Yeah, I would just say I've made a living off of brainstorming, which is pretty much a yes and tool. It's yes and how about this idea? How about this idea? So it's just that. And then his first name is Andrew. He has a fabulous magic show called The Backyard Patio in San Francisco, and he combines improv, magic, and design. So
Wow.
he's spoken in our class a couple times. His last
Yeah,
name
he's great.
is me. So yeah, I think it's just great. Okay, so that was it. Please, if you're feeling like it's Giving Tuesday, scan that in. And thanks for joining, everybody.
Thanks for joining.
Stuart,
Keep playing.
so wonderful to hang out with you. I got to come down to Carmel again.
Yeah, please do. You're always welcome.
All right. See you, Stuart. I think we can just hit leave.